And then the next big thing that I'm gonna do is start working on the bench seat. So we have the drive shaft tunnel here, which you saw me make in a previous episode, and it's significantly higher than stock. Stock was maybe where this bead rolled element is off the ground, and so we're gonna have to do some big trimming of the seat. So I have the front seat sitting right here, and this is the base that mounts to the brackets, the sliders, and you can see this is the factory relief for the original drive shaft and trans tunnel. And so I'm going to have to cut out the middle of this and rebuild it with some sheet metal and bracing. And once I get the base to fit with the sliders, then I'm going to have to go and modify the seat base. And so I'm going to have to take the upholstery off of it and strip out the springs for the section that needs to get redone. And then I'm going to have to go and cut all of these support rods here and make some U's that are the right size and shape to go up and over the drive shaft tunnel, and get this whole thing welded back together and modify any of the upholstery and whatnot. And then we'll have to get it back in the car and make sure that it has the full range of motion. The one thing I'm really worried about here with this is that the drive shaft tunnel is probably so high that the pivots for the seat backs are gonna interfere with it, which then that's gonna be a whole new thing, because the seat, at least one side of it, folds forward to let people into the back. And so all of those hinges need to be concentric to each other, otherwise it's not gonna work properly. Actually, I think they might be a little bit off concentric on purpose, so that when the seat back comes forward, it kind of has a little bit, it gains a little bit of angle for easier entry. So that's one thing that I'm kind of concerned about, and I'm going to have to figure out if indeed it does interfere with that hinge. Then the whole project is just going to be a little bit more involved, but we'll get it done. And so I'm going to get this column braced up, and then I'm going to start working on that base. I'm waiting on some parts that should be here in a couple days. Clutch pedal, the rest of the parts for the exhaust, a whole bunch of fittings so that I can finish the fuel plumbing from the frame rail. I'll build a stainless steel hardline up and around the engine and valve cover here, and then I'll be able to finish the whole fuel system. I have the throttle cable that can go in at that point, and I will keep making progress on that. Pretty soon here, within the week, I will start working on the wiring. So I got to get a battery and mount that. That's going to mount underneath the rear seat on the underside of the body. And so I'll have to run battery cable forward to the starter, cable forward to the alternator, and then I'm going to run cables into the trunk with some bulkhead unions, so that if I ever have to jump the car, I can just open the trunk and connect some cables right up to that. But I'm going to get an AGM battery that's a dual purpose battery, that's a starting and deep cycle battery, since this is not going to be my daily driver. You know, it might sit 2 or 3 weeks, and so regular battery, that's real bad for that. And so we'll get that combo battery going, and this thing should be pretty simple to wire up as far as the air system and fuel pump and ignition and starter and everything like that. I'll just have to figure out all of the stuff behind the dash. I'll have to get some of the DLEOs that convert 12 volts down to 6 volts for the gauges and do some research on that, but that won't be hard. But yeah, so let's keep jamming on this thing and keep making progress. All right, I've been working on the front bench seat, and I got it chopped apart. I thought it was going to be super drastic. And it is a little bit, but not quite as much as I thought. It's gonna take a lot of work to the bottom cushion and all the framework to get it to function right. It's gonna take even more work for the backs to fit correctly because I'm not gonna be able to use the middle pivots on the backs. I'm gonna have to rebuild that stuff. But here's what I got going on. The seat is in here, and I have it chopped in 2 pieces. Chopped out the center for the drive shaft tunnel here, and then I've just used a couple pieces of bar with the same size tubing underneath, clamped, and what that does is make sure that both sections are on the same plane as each other and back square to where they would have been. I have each side mounted on the seat rails, and so there's plenty of clearance here to put a piece of metal on the back, and then take the section that I cut out and raise it up and weld it back in. And I'll probably have to do some triangulation to get it to be as sturdy as it was. So we'll see how all that plays out. I'll probably just weld like an 1/8 inch plate vertically between these two, and then maybe bend up some sheet metal like how this U-shaped box section is, and then box that vertical piece in. Otherwise I may just make like another 1/8 inch triangle piece to weld in there. We'll see how that goes and how that's going to interact with the seat base itself, but it's coming along. I'm gonna have to just use a blanket on top of it for this year because I'm gonna have to take the factory fabric and peel it back from both seat backs and from the seat base to be able to do all the modifications. And it's the original fabric, and it's really brittle, and there's moving blankets that have been hog ringed on top of it as is, so I think there must be holes in it from mice or just from 75 years of use and whatnot. So the next step here is to take the whole seat base out. I've taken measurements on the total width as it sits, and so we'll take this back out of the car and get it on my welding table and clamp the assembly back together, and I'll be able to use a clamp on the back side as well as the top side of this, and as well as this too, to make sure that we have the 2 pieces concentric this way and level this way and everything. So using all that all those surfaces to clamp it down, we'll square everything back up, and I'll be able to start working on some plates to weld the middle section back in. There's the inner seat back pivots you can see, and those are designed to be in line with the pivots on the seat, and since those are going to be raised up now, they're not going to function how they should, and so I don't have a solution for that yet. Once I get the seat base welded back together, then I'll start thinking about how I'm going to make that happen. I have one idea in my head, but it's gonna the likelihood that it's gonna work is pretty small. So I'll just have to play around with it, get the seat backs trimmed up after I get the base trimmed up, and play around with it and kind of see what room I have. So this is a pretty big job, but once that's done, I'll be able to sit down in the car and feel the pedals and the steering wheel and make some vroom noises, and that'll be a big step, and it'll be really motivating. And that's one of the important things when you're working on a project like this, that, hundreds and hundreds of hours to even get it to this point. You need those days where, you know, you get remotivated. So the first time I put the frame on the ground after the suspension was done was huge for me. When I got the body back on the frame and the trunk all gutted out, ready to start the sheet metal, was a pretty big day. When all the sheet metal was done all the way up to the firewall, that was a super huge day. That was so motivating. And then a week later, when my friends came over and we got the body back on and got the thing on the ground again, that was the most motivation that I've had here. So being able to sit on the bench seat in the car, play with the steering wheel and the pedals and everything is going to be really huge for my focus. And we're not at I wouldn't say we're at the home stretch by any means right now, but almost all the pieces of the puzzle are in play now, and things are happening pretty fast. So I'll get this seat base modified and we'll check back in with you. All right, I have the seat base for the front bench seat done, at least done for now. Down the line, when I go and do some fresh upholstery on it, I may make some modifications, but here it is. Obviously, I had to section it for the drive shaft tunnel here, and so I started by bending up some flat stock that is the appropriate dimensions to leave a 1/4 inch of clearance around the trans tunnel for carpet when there's carpet in there, and so that it's not rubbing and scraping on anything. And once I got those pieces in there, then I built these plates for the front and the rear to create a 3rd dimension to brace it. So this thing is nice and sturdy. If it was just these pieces of flat stock, it would be all wobbly. In fact, it was. Now to get this thing square again, I just used some like 2x4 metal tubing with another tube across it and used some big C-clamps to make sure that this was parallel to this and was parallel in the other plane too, because you don't want those two pieces to be running uphill or downhill or not match up, obviously. I had this thing in and out of the car many times, bolted it into the slider rails that this bolts to make sure that everything was good to go. And then afterwards, I added in these 4 pieces here that just add a little more structural rigidity to it and also help with the seat base. These guys right here are gonna help keep the springs and everything that's going on in the seat base in its own kind of containment so that it can't smush out and start contacting the drive shaft tunnel there. So that is the seat base here. Let me move this out of the way. And here is the seat base. Turn this around. So what I did was build these 1/4 inch bars that go up and over the trans tunnel as well based on the seat base. And so I stripped the seat down as you saw. I stripped all of the coils out that were going to be in the way and welded these 4 guys in, then welded the cross bracing in, and then cut out the center of it, which wound up being this piece right here. Used to go right up in there. So I welded all of that up first and then cut this out so that it wouldn't change shape and so that everything was parallel and in line with each other. And this thing is even more sturdy than it used to be. And you can see here when we put it in there, fits up just like it should. The rod here lays on top of this. This is the flange that goes down for the upholstery to wrap around, so that interfaces like it should. You can see the clearance that we have here. I wanted to make sure that there was ample clearance there for any upholstery or anything that kind of hangs down, like hog rings and whatever. I probably could have made it a little bit tighter to here, but like I said, I want to make sure everything clears. And you can see the clearance between the seat base and the bottom of the seat. And so everything fits in here real nice and snug. And the next step here is going to be putting all of the springs back in. I'm basically going to break them down to individual components. And so I know that the spring will fit here, and I'll be able to shove one more in this area. And obviously I'll be able to fit 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 right there. And then everything that's on top of here is going to have to be modified. So I may be able to just use the regular springs that go right here. There's going to be 2 of them kind of on top of here. And if they compress easy and they don't add a lot of preload to kind of, you know, I don't want the leading edge of this to bow upwards. So I'm thinking I won't have to modify the springs, but if I do, it won't be too hard. And then as we come down here, you can see the clearance gets less and less until this is basically actually touching right here, which is fine because no one's really going to be sitting in the middle. And if you do, it really shouldn't be too bad because there is some padding that goes on top of this and then the upholstery. But as we come back, there's less and less room. So I will have to possibly modify these springs. I'm thinking it might just be as easy as taking some stainless steel wire and in 3 or 4 spots just looping the wire on the spring and shortening it to the length it needs to be for the maximum length, so it's not adding any kind of preload. Like I said, I don't want anything to like be bulging up here because of the springs, but these springs are also really easy to compress. So we'll see. I'll kind of get everything in there individually, get it clipped back in and hog ringed in as I go, and then make the decision at that time.
Come on, tough guy.
You're the one touching my camera through the fence.